Welcome to the Sweet Science of Fighting podcast. Today we have Sam Portland. Welcome, Sam.
Thanks for having me, mate.
No, thanks for coming on. It was good. My miscalculation of going live on Facebook ended up going live on my personal page, and then you saw it. So now we're chatting. So serendipitous. It was perfectly planned in the end. But for people who don't know you, Sam, do you want to give a brief background about yourself?
Yeah, let's hit it. I'll keep it sweet, short and sweet. 30-second version. Rugby player. This is my story. I was a rugby player, got told I was too skinny, got let go from 13, 17 years, 6'4", 80 plus kilos. Ended up breaking my leg the day Wasps came to scout me at the wrong club. 2 years later, I ended up getting hired back by Wasps to be a strength coach there. Worked my way through the academy. In 18 months, I ended up in the first team. Was there for a few years. Resigned in 2015. Crazy place to work. Had some stuff going on in my personal life. Took some time off. Had a bereavement. Went to Everest Base Camp. Then went to work for Ealing in the championship. 2.5 years later, I got fired from there unofficially. But it was, you don't challenge the status quo when someone waiting for shoulder surgery gets told to play conditioned games. The rest is history with that, literally. And then I started, I'd always had my own business. And then phone goes, do you fancy working with Alex Gray in the NFL? And I was like, yeah, why not? Let's do it. And it just snowballs from there. Speed is my thing. It's in my body. It's in my blood. And I just love helping athletes. And I do a load in the coach education space now, really. And then live on the south coast of England. So anyone wants to come to the beach, just hit me up.
Nice. Very nice. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the politics around professional sport. We were just talking briefly before this. I mean, we've gone through similar things in the pro sporting world. I think I've touched on the podcast many times, and people probably, any aspiring strength and conditioning coaches listening to this, it's stuff you're going to have to deal with at some point.
Yeah.
You're going to probably work with some dumbass coaches that, like one I work with that his reasoning for doing everything was because of what he did in 1995 when they made the final.
Yeah.
My God, that was a...
Yeah.
That was a testing season, that one. Jeez. Anyway.
Yeah.
back to our topic of speed and power training. So I guess we can pretty well label it as almost like a speed coach. I mean, you're not just a speed coach, but that seems to be where a lot of your, I guess, internet content kind of centers around. And obviously sprinting and things, doesn't exactly, I guess, cover combat sports, but the idea of training speed is universal regardless. So it'd be cool to kind of just jump into your philosophy around training speed, how that looks potentially in the weight room, and then we can maybe even jump to the conditioning side too.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say this because I was thinking about the way that we could talk. I actually worked in track and field for 18 months. I got fired there as well, halfway through a pre-season planning meeting.
How many times have you been fired?
I've been fired from pretty much every job for putting the athletes first every time. Put the athletes first, you end up getting fired. But so recently, I've had a really bad hamstring injury. I had 2 grade 3 Cs, both 8 centimeters long from playing American football. I got hit in the air, flipped, and as I hit the ground, someone tackled my leg.
I've seen that video actually.
Yeah, it's wild. My semitendinosus is literally hanging on by its thread. So I'm reluctant to never get surgery, and we'll just have to see about that. And this is, I'm getting somewhere with it. I was able to still run over 8.5 meters per second with that hamstring as it is.
Oh, wow.
And so we're going to talk about Lila and the reasons why that's all possible. But I actually started boxing.
Oh, nice.
Recently, yeah. And I've had to take a break because I've been writing my book. But I was like, I need to do something. I love Rocky, grew up in Rocky. And I was like, I need a fight. I need to learn more about myself and get exposed and do the real, the rite of passage of boxing. I've never really played in individual sports. So I started doing some pad work and I started to think about, actually about how do we create velocity? How am I going to create punch speed? And it's the way I just quickly turned it on in my head is just like the Fist is the foot. Fist is the foot, and it's the terminal extension that you're able to create at high speed will create punch momentum. And the way you recenter to the ground, say if you're doing a jab, for example, that's a loose flick. You can get it out and you can sting with it. Whereas if you're throwing across, you have to sink into that shot to create movement, but let it go. Unravel the body to create the speed. And, anytime I've played, worked with all the athletes I've done, we did blocking with Alex Gray when he was a tight end and some of the American footballs, those specialized exercises and those specialized means, they're all velocity determined. None of it is done at slow speed. And if you like the way that I categorize training, stolen from Bondarchuk, all those guys, and is before you considering the most specific general element of training is speed. So if you are understanding, and if you create an understanding of the general physical qualities of training, then everything below speed must feed speed, and everything above speed must be fed by speed. So every technical constraint of the competition just has to be fed by speed, which is underpinned by recoverable abilities. And I've fast learned from boxing that I'm very alactic aerobic. I am not anaerobic, which then shaped the way that I would do rounds and do stuff like that. It taught me so much, and in terms of like that general philosophy of speed for any sport, of any discipline, if you can understand that the thing that interacts with the ground or the thing that interacts with the opponent is a resultant effect of everything that happens above it. In order to create it, you have to let it go. It's an involuntary resultant effect. And that's it, really. That's kind of where I sit with it.
I've got a good question here that I think will continue the same, topic as well. I got some I just wrote down too, but from Wilson, Reza, sorry there, Wilson, but he's saying, as I understand, speed is just a manifestation of skill and strength. If you are stronger and practice the movement, you will get faster, be it a punch, a kick, or a sprint.
So this is live this is live conversation.
Yeah, live question coming in just for you.
Yeah,
just for you, man.
That's it. So I think it's a great question, because we in contact sports and rugby and field sports, everything is driven by strength. The early progress is driven by strength, and what we have to understand is the thing that gets us there is not the thing that's going to get us to the next place. You have to imagine like you're on the London Underground. You have to leave one station to get to the next, and it's called something different and it looks different. That's the role of specialization. And if they can see me now, what you'll have this upward curve and it will flatten out. So what happens when we first start training is, and if we take the premise that you create adaptation by two things, as I've forgotten the gentleman's name.
Wilson.
Wilson, as Wilson said, technical. So you get strong, and then your technical capacity will help take that strength and use it. So it is correct. So like you create adaptation by motor learning, motor control, motor potential, but then you also do it just by building that horsepower. So what happens when we first start? I take a recent example of learning to box. I progressed really quickly because I had a very extensive history of speedy, explosive power training. And the adaptation came from me understanding the technique. So strength actually wasn't the thing that was creating progress. Technique was, a motor learning. However, if I had entered that situation and I was just strong, I would suffer, because my ability to produce speed in the context of striking, for example, would be inhibited by my ability to recruit motor units from an involuntary. This is where we're thinking the things that I do create the speed. The things that I do create the power, as opposed to as I said before, the resultant effect of letting it go. So we get this upward trajectory straight away, and we get this early progress, and we're like, oh my, I've just been squatting, I've been trap barring, and then I'm hitting, and it's like, oh, because everything's starting to work. We just opened up a new door of motor unit, but that's all we've done with it. If we keep doing that, and this is the role of specialization and stuff that it's very simple rules. If you want to improve your squat, eventually you have to become a powerlifter. And if you want to improve your sprint speed, you have to become a sprinter. So what are we doing? I say with rugby, or football, field sports, everything has to be done to become a team sport sprinter. So everything in fighting has to become a better fighter. And strength doesn't make you a better fighter. Strength will create a higher, what we'll call adaptive reserve, that will give you a capacity to be able to practice fighting more, and also specifically apply more progressive means. And that's when we're thinking about doing it. The difference between specialized exercises in fighting would be different weights of gloves.
Mm-hmm.
Doing, isolation work with different weights of gloves will actually if you think of what you've got, our hand, the segments of the upper body, we've got our hand, we've got our forearm, we've got our humerus, and we've got our shoulder thoracic girdle. When we throw that punch, it's exactly the same with speed. It's the ankle, the shin, the thigh, the hip flexor, the lower back. When we throw that punch, if we put more mass on the end, the faster it will release at the end, because it will pick up its own level of momentum. If I'm too strong, I won't be able to create momentum, because I'll be inhibited, because the brain won't like to let go. And it's the same as for Wilson. If you pull an elastic band, you pull it fast, you have no control of the speed of which it will snap back. The rate at which things snap back is actually the punch.
I've got a bunch of stuff written down for you too from this. So yeah. Did you? I'm gonna jump straight in here. Yeah, I know, it's good. I love it. I think we have pretty similar, strength conditioning philosophies around the speed stuff. But I wanted to jump into. You've mentioned a lot about. I guess at the beginning, okay, yep, strength training, getting stronger. You're going to have that transfer, I guess, to skill already, because you're newer to either one. These things kind of come together. But at some point, you're going to have to do something different. And you've talked a lot about specialization or specific training, and there's obviously different philosophies around this. One of them is that whatever you do in the gym or strength training is always general. It's always GPP. It doesn't matter what you do. It's just about you're improving outputs. That's all it is in the gym, versus being like, hey, maybe there is some way we can improve transfer from the gym to the sport through various exercises or the way we do things. So you want to just jump into that, where that fits in your philosophy?
Yeah, 100%. And this is where I think it's a great question, because again, if you're preparing for a fight, you've got 8-week camp, for example, 8 to 10 week camp. Same for a pre-season. You've got 6 to 8 weeks in field sports. It's not a lot of time, and an off season. And so the misunderstanding that is created around exercise selection in relation to training cycles is when we don't know what one exercise lends itself to the next. So the role of specialization is to take something that has been developed by one exercise and used in the next exercise. So, for example, the easiest one for me is acceleration in sprinting. I would use my most general exercise, and this is where we have to think about the double tier system. Remember, everything's to develop speed and then fed by speed. So the first tier is developing to create just general speed. So I would use a trap bar deadlift, a standing broad jump, and then a 5-meter acceleration. And that would be my base specific stack. It's just a stack of 3 exercises, 1 strength, 1 power, and 1 of our specialized.
Is this done in the same session, or is this progressed over
weeks? So this is what we will be weighting things against. because if my strength goes up, my broad jump comes down. Well, I've got a problem. Because if my ability to, this is the physics, my ability to put my center of mass as far forward as possible is, remember that curve is flatlining. Well, we don't need, it's not a strength problem anymore.
Yeah, gotcha.
And so I know if I can't do the thing fast in an isolated context, my speed's going to struggle. So in relation, you look at like a lot of the early Soviet periodization stuff, and if we were able to create for a trained exercise, for a trained athlete, if we were able to, in a general phase of preparation, if we were to realize 3 to 4% on a general strength lift in our general phase of training, that's a win. We then get rid of that, and then we start using it. And then, but when people say, "Oh, we've always got to stay general, always stay general," the reality is that it's all general until you've got the pads on and you're getting hit in the face. It's everything's general. So the extent of which you can understand general training will be the most successful that you get, and knowing that if you do one camp and you take your trap bar from 150 to 170, you're clean. Like, that's easy. You're good. That will hold you through camp. And then the next time you go around, maybe within 2 to 3 workouts, you're already at that 170. See if you can push it up to 180 and see if the effect of that has an upstream consequence. Whereas, as we say, if you want to keep improving your strength, you've got to become a powerlifter. If you want to be better at fighting, you have to fight more. And the role of general training is to allow you to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And you've also talked a lot about, I guess, this letting go, or I guess the switching off, or we could just say, let's just say being able to relax. And it's a really interesting concept. There are various ways we can go into maybe some of the training, but I wanted to start around, I guess, the idea of maximal strength training in this role. And is there a way that someone could potentially do too much? Because a lot of people will say, hey, you can never be strong enough. And I think when you say you can never be strong enough, we can't just refer to, hey, squat, bench, deadlift, because strength is not a technical lift. Strength is a expression of force doing whatever you're doing. So let's maybe dive into, okay, if I'm doing a shit ton of maximal strength training, am I potentially, if I'm not doing other speed stuff, ruining or stopping this ability to be able to rapidly switch on and off? And is this a quality that I need to have as maybe a striker or MMA athlete?
Yeah, 100%. It made me laugh. You saw Eddie Hall in the Octagon, right?
Dude, fighting two midgets as well, bro. I was like, this can't be real.
Honestly, at that point when I saw that, I was like, we are on the downslope as a civilization. We peaked. We peaked before. But so when we look at the general training effects, and that's I guess what we're talking about, and I'm glad that you said strength is a task specific expression. It is, and so we've got the structural effects of training and the functional effects of training. Super training 101, isn't it? And the structural effects is going to be increasing muscle size and structure. Functional effects are everything, as we talked about, intermuscular, intramuscular coordination, reflexive inhibition, that switching on and off that we really need to talk about, and the amount of muscle units that we can recruit. So what happens was, if we're doing too much strength training, for example...
But maybe let's just define what strength training might actually look like.
Yeah, so if we're doing too much barbell lifting, 85% range, 75% range, doing Jim Wynn does 5-3-1 too much, basically, or 5x5s, or any number by number that just sounds good, that type of training. What we're going to be doing with that, as we're moving, bar and the external load too slow, our body's going to adapt to that rate of force production and force recruitment. Remember, we've got functional, structural effects, and then functional effects. And what we have to do is be coercing the functional effects of training more as athletes, because it's really easy to get bigger. Just lift things faster because you turn on more motor units. And also in fighting, size is not always a good thing. You're weight classified, so you've got to do it's not like Rocky versus Drago, but we're in a place where when you have to think about training as a language, as you're feeding your body and you're instructing it to do something. And that's where we create the voluntary versus involuntary actions. And as I said to you, we're talking about Lila. It's actually the whole Western civilization has really, really forgotten and misinterpreted a lot of the original Soviet work, because we understood it to be around voluntary action. Whereas if you think about the original Soviet stuff with Yuri and the plyometric and shock method, it was actually to create involuntary responses. The whole idea of training was to work towards involuntary action. So the consequential effects of the modality that we're using, that's what was measured. Not, he obviously started with weightlifting, the Bulgarian methods, and then all the drugs came in and all that stuff, because the context was to win medals in weightlifting. Then it was gymnastics. Then it became more Olympic sport disciplines as we know them, track and field and stuff like that. So, but everything was, we just need to find a little bit of strength. So the body is capable of creating the opposing release. So what we can prime the body with is what it can then give us output from. And that's that. That's cool. The similar, the simple analogy is Newton's third law. You drop a bouncy ball and it will only bounce up to the mass times the velocity it hits the ground. Whereas if you throw it, it's going to bounce higher. But the key differentiator between both conditions is the ability to the ball to become rigid, because no one ever talks about, well, actually, what's the structure of the ball? How is if one ball's flat and one ball's hard, they're going to actually bounce the same. So when we think about creating involuntary action, it's the way that the brain works, called reflexive inhibition, and it comes from the brain. And what it does is it tells your body to relax, to then find velocity, because you can't, any of the guys watching, the girls watching, they'll know they throw their best punches when they're not tight. And all of the general strength training means require you to be tight.
Yeah.
They create the complete opposite feeling. So why, with our chimp brains, A plus B does not equal C in that scenario? We need to find that by actually training in the way, and that's where the submaximal loads, like, you can do strength training, you need it, but I don't think people realize how little of it they actually need.
Yeah, volume is the real killer in it, right?
Yeah.
Because most people will go into, as you mentioned, say like a 5x5. I'm going to start strength training, so they do 5x5 and they go squat, bench, barbell, row, and there's no actual jumps, plyometrics, throws, rotation, nothing done. Maybe a little bit, but the majority of the program is something like a 5x5 over 3 lifts. And then that's where, I guess, what you're talking about there. But if we're training this reflex, this ability to have this inhibition, I guess one way that we talked about a long time ago on the podcast and haven't revisited it, so it'd be good to revisit it now, was run this oscillatory isometrics.
Yeah.
Do you want to maybe jump to a bit of that, and maybe if there's something else that you typically maybe like to use or have found useful for developing this, skill?
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool. I like this stuff because it's really challenging, and it challenges so much of what we believe. Um and I think so. One mistake I believe a lot of strength and conditioning practitioners do is they try to extend the significance that the gym has within their training. So there's a well-known popular coach who wrote a book, and he just pretty much sticks a fucking band on anything and creates crazy ways to extend the window of gym time, because in the context of that place, that is the place where they do their work. So it's about the importance versus significance trade-off. So what we need to understand, most importantly, in how we create, like oscillatory isometrics, for example, when we talk about speed, I always have a joke with the guys that I work with. Who can tell me what doesn't run? A run-specific isometric. Okay? So when we think about, that was the joke. It was meant to be funny. You were meant to laugh at that.
Like, wait,
right?
say that.
Yeah, that was the joke, right? So terrible joke. But that in itself is the example of doing something that really doesn't contribute to the other. It may look like a duck, but it's not a duck, And when we think about the rates of force we're trying to produce in the times of which we're trying to produce them, it cannot be voluntary. None of it's voluntary. It's a consequential effect. So one of the ways that's really unlocked this for me is using Exogen, using Lila, so the micro loads. But before I had that, I used to basically have a paradigm in my head. It was like, when do I let him loose? When do I let her loose? Because in all that time before it, we were doing everything to prime the body to turn off, to turn the conscious brain off. So when we were doing all of our speed work, it would be, I just want you to feel light. I want you to bounce. We do long accelerations. So, up to 50 meters, last 10 meters, you're 8 out of 10, and I need you to fly. But all the time you're building up to it, you're trying to be quicker off the ground, bigger in your steps, faster in your leg movement. And that is, from a structural point of view, is putting energy in the tendon. So it's putting energy in the elastic component of the body, which it needs. It needs to juice up. And, from if any of your listeners, if you throw a 3-punch or 4-punch combination, the stored and released energy as you're building through, your last shot is probably faster and heavier and has more power than your first. Because the way you're twisting and coiling the body, that's all subconscious. Because what's happening, and this is when we think about oscillatory isometrics, go back into super training, what they do, you use them in a weak range. Use them in a weak range, and to then teach the brain that weak range to be fast in that range, essentially overloading through very, very short to create multiple contractions. And when we are, in the context of training, when we think about that, great for late stage rehab, great for putting the tissues under stress, but it's not going to unlock the door to performance that we think it was. What it turns the handle. What unlocks the door is actually doing the thing that we want transfer from. And we create the impulses that we want. And think, when you're hitting a bag, the impulse is the contact. You're creating that impulse. And the whole idea, when, and this is, there's probably a very more experienced fighters on this listening to this. But when you throw one, you pull back with the other. You know, the 1-2, you throw and you pull it back, because getting it back, it's that stretch reflex that's going to allow you to release the other one. It's the same with running.
Mm-hmm.
It's the contralateral effect. So the faster I can throw this, the harder I can throw this. And you don't think about the force that you put in. You just drop and let it go. And you've seen so many like boxing coaches. There's a really good boxing documentary on BBC called Stables with Shane McGuigan. BBC UK is really, really good. And because he's got like an old boxing stable. They've got about 4 or 5 world champions. It's very different. They train as a team rather than individuals. But all the time, it's like, just let your hands go. Let your hands go. Let your hands go. Because it's stop trying. Stop being so rigid in that approach. You turn the conscious brain off, we create speed. And that's what Lila does by putting small 100, 200 grams on the distal segments of the body to start off with. You can use them, they got torso, we use them on the hips and the legs. What it does is it's the compounding storage and release of elastic energy within the tendon. That all of a sudden, that's what builds the speed. And that's what builds the power and builds the velocity that everyone wants to create. And over time, you know, when he spoke to me on the phone about this, he was like, mate, I've got something that will make your rugby players faster and they can wear it in training. I was like, sign me the fuck up. Because I've been waiting for such a long time for something like that. And the fact that you can train and here's one for everyone to consider. One of the most freeing things that I ever decided to do in my training was to identify the competitive exercise or the competitive task that I wanted to train. So when everyone says, how do we improve? Well, we're improving speed, strength, power. No, you're not. They're the subcomponents of training. You want to identify the competitive task. So whether that be your cross, whether that be your left hook, your right hook, you are going to run a thread through your program, through your training that develops that one quality. And it has a taught language all the way through. And we do that with acceleration, top speed running. If my guys can't go far forward, well, we think of it, you know, and I take so much influence from the way Louis Simmons developed powerlifting and the JM press, for example, guys that couldn't lock out. He developed, well, let's put them in that position and let's make task-specific strength. Okay, so what do I need to do? If my athlete can't go from a 2-point start, lean forward, and then create power off of that front foot extension, well, I have to put him in that position. I have to load that. And I have to load it from a general strength consideration. But then also, what I have to do is I have to load it fast, and I have to overload it. So we do lots of single leg, like 45-degree quarter squats, basically. Band that fucking thing up as heavy and as hard as you can, and you push like there's nothing left in your body. And you tell me, can you get 8 to 10 out? Because your 10th one's going to be your fastest one. And the same, Ross Training, the coach for Katie Daly.
I don't think I've seen it.
She's the Irish girl, isn't she? She's the beast. He's old school. He's like, when I first started, you were watching like Zach Evanish on YouTube and Elliot Hulse before he lost his mind and did all of that stuff. And
yep, for sure.
We all go on that. I think I've lost my mind like 4 times already, so it's absolutely fine. But he would literally single-banded repeat elastic punching. Because why? Because he understood the role that actually the recoil is the most important part. Because if it wasn't, we'd only just throw, and we wouldn't rebound out of it. The art is in the rebound, and we don't control it. We just have to use and rely on our body's structural integrity to tolerate it. So when I talk to athletes, they said, no one tears their hamstring at top speed. They'll tear it getting there. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I know what you mean. For anyone who's wondering what he's talking about with Lila and Exogen, if you go back many episodes, I had Joe, the owner, on the podcast. We did a whole episode on using the Exogen, the microloading things. Also, John Cronin was on the podcast a while ago as well. I think we talked about it there too. And Aaron Uthoff. Yep. So these guys have all been on the podcast. You can go back and listen to those as well. But so you talked about, okay, oscillatory isometrics, they're not going to give you that ability to switch off during the task because that's maybe specific. Could you potentially complex those two together, like oscillatory isometrics, to kind of get that feeling, and then maybe go into something like the microload punching or something like that?
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah. I think you would, complex trading, absolutely. Right? What I found, and I learned a lot from starting boxing and understanding task-specific strength, because I was sore in my body where I've never been sore in my life. I was 36 and lots of, decent level rugby in England. And so, and I was like, well, what can I, experiment is the best thing. What's going to allow me to unload quicker? What's going to allow me to work things differently? So I would, understanding pivot and rotation is very, in the way that you have to rotate in fight sports is very different to the way you rotate when you sprint. And so I would use heavier med balls one side of the hip and across the body to the wall, just so, just somewhere to put it, to get the hips to flip in the way that I needed them to flip to throw a lead hook. Then I would do that and I'd hit the bag. And then, because it's just that hitting, turning on the muscles in the way that we need them to behave, and then showing them how they need to behave. And knowing I had to stop punching with my hands and start punching with my body. The same way as sprinting. You don't run with your feet. Because as soon as you start punching with your hands, you have your hands, don't you? And then all of a sudden, it's a whip. That's that recoil. So what you'd be able to do, and I don't think, like French contrast training, I think if it was any good, there would be a lot more books on it. There would be a lot more on French contrast training. And I understand the premise of it. It's just a variation of complex work. In most settings, it's way too complicated and it's way too intense for people. Use it with your national level long jumpers, absolutely. Don't use it with your beat up boxers and your rugby players, because your body gets hit for a living. So I would find variations, and this is what I like to do with with rugby is you would have our specialized developmental exercises or our specialized preparatory exercises, then go into the skill. Then and just flip between the two, and then hit things full flight. So in a boxing session, you would, in your warm up, you would be doing the strength training movements to warm the body up. Yeah.
Almost like a form of microdosing your power work too, right? Or strength to power work.
Absolutely. And then working with your coach, is my body moving? Has that helped move my body in the right way? If it hasn't, we need to get rid of it. Are you a fighter that needs to fights a specific way? And then you build the language. You build the language around it. But yeah, absolutely, the complex. And then you put the micro loading on, and the magic with the micro loading happens when you take it off. Because once you have that upregulation of the body, and then all of a sudden you are just moving. You are just moving. And that's what I said to you at the beginning about with my hamstring. It removed so much pain inhibition. I was doing A skips, B skips with it, and just some gentle build-ups.
Yeah.
And I took it off and I was like, oh, let's give this a go. And that was with 2 8-centimeter tears because of the way that the body turned itself. It was all subconscious.
Yeah, it sounds counterintuitive as well, because it's like, for anyone listening, it's like literally like 50 to 200 gram weights, grams, not kilograms, not pounds, like grams. And you're literally placing these little strips on your arms or your legs or wherever you're doing it. And the idea is that because the formula for rotational inertia is, I can't remember what the first symbol is, but then it's radius squared. So essentially, the further away you place the load from the pivot point, like you're literally adding a square value of rotational inertia on top of it. So it goes a long way when you're adding these small things away. And it's a very potent way of, I guess you could say, specific strength training, really, right? Because you're putting on your arms while you're punching, or on your legs while you're sprinting, different places. You can overload certain muscle groups based on where you put it, how you put it. Yeah, it's such a cool piece of technology. I'm surprised it hasn't made its way more into combat sports with how much people love, I guess, like overly specific exercises. Yeah, but I guess it will eventually.
Yeah, 100%. And with that, the formula, the faster you get, the faster it goes. And so, if the best example of the effect of it is Sha'Carri Richardson at the moment in the 100 meters. Like, she's been loading with it for about 2 years.
Oh wow!
And that girl is flying. She's unbeatable at the moment, And when if anyone wants to go, she ran last weekend. Her video will be online, and you watch that 100 meters, and the way that it builds, you can just see it against anyone else. It's like she's half the size of everyone, and she's on a different level because she's been training the brain the way that it wants to behave. And so exactly, it's that specialized. And I think rather than even strength training, it's almost technical overload.
Coordination training, right? Almost like you could say Franz Bosch to an extent.
Oh, we wouldn't go that far.
Yeah, we can't. We've gone too far.
And that's and I think, but I think the Franz work, like, he was onto something.
Yeah,
I think
I love it.
You can go so far down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, you can definitely go too far.
And I think what we need to understand, the most important, and that's why I reject a lot of like the hip lock ideas and stuff like that, because the consequential effects of training, consequential effects of movement, they're the things that happen that we don't need to focus on. Because they're going to happen with or without us. And the way that you teach the body's awareness to it is not slow, it is fast. And that is so, that's such an important part of training when we understand that technical overload, that we're creating that coordinative element, and then we can use it in a way that's so important. And I feel one of the things that I was so privileged to be able to do was work in professional sport and be able to produce, and I don't take this the wrong way, but produce the outputs of a professional athlete, just nowhere near good enough at the game. So the challenge was, well, if I can out broad jump these wingers and out 10 them and hang in there at top speed with these professional rugby players, well, then we've got a fucking problem. Because I need them to take on players faster. I need them to move more effectively on the field. You think about fighting, you need to work the ring better. You need to have the speed to be able to work the ring. Do you see what I mean? That's that next level of preparation, and that I really started to learn and understand by watching training watching people, even like Christian Wade, like one of the best finishers that rugby's ever seen, do his thing in training and start to understand, how do we do this? What are those things? And they're all subconscious. They're all trained. You think about some of your favorite fighters and you think about some of the favorite athletes and why they're your favorite. None of it is because of their ability to train in the gym. They've developed a style around the way that their body is designed to work. We at WASP at one time, we had Christian Wade on one wing and Tom Varndale on the other. They were both the current top try scorers in the league that year. One was 6'4" and built like a fucking racehorse. He was 105 kilos, shredded, could pull 10 meters per second. And then Christian Wade, who was like 5'10" and jinky. They both played the same position, but they played it in a very different way. And you could try and replicate their training, or do the 20 years of them figuring out how to be effective in what they do. And I think Lila, I segue sort of back into Lila speeds up that process for people.
Are you using it? Are you just wearing it and doing rounds, like on the bag or pads or something like that?
Yeah. So when I first started up at 16 ounces on, and after we did 2 on 1 off for 9, so 3 of them, I couldn't lift my fucking arms up because it was just so heavy,
Yeah.
And I came out of my first sparring session with a bruise above my right eye, and it was because I just couldn't keep my hand. So what I was wearing them, I just wasn't fit enough. Fit enough. But what I use them to do is the technical elements of the striking. So I'd wear them to practice on my own and get the hands moving in a way that they had not moved before. Just to speed up that relationship with things. And you'll find that, one of the biggest things that if you're thinking about learning a new skill, and this could be for any of the fighters, and think about developing something into their game plan. For example, what I found, which would be very arbitrary to a lot of people, I'm just sharing my experience, is I found the ability to decrease the time between punches so difficult. So on combos, trying to decrease the time. It was so easy to increase the time because I didn't know what the bloody hell I was doing. But I recognized it. It's like, right, well, this is the relationship between steps 1 and step 6 in sprinting. I have to continue to increase my speed through it. So how am I going to do that? Well, I have to learn to speed up my body. How do I do that? Well, let's just strap on some loading tools and practice for half an hour. But in that half an hour, I would do probably, it was 1 a minute or so, because it was all about skill, motor learning, motor control, and output, rather than conditioning. Because if I could effectively utilize the combo, then I would actually be more efficient in my own fighting. It's the same, and you can replace that with anything you're trying to do. And that's where everything can be fed by speed, because it's the thing that everyone trains for. I
actually want to touch on the conditioning as well, regarding how does your conditioning look, I guess, to work with training speed? Because obviously you can do conditioning to work against it if you're doing it. Again, volume is a killer. So do you want to maybe dive into how that conditioning may look for the situation, for trying to maximize power and speed?
Yeah. So remember, you made a great point really early on for listeners, is that everything we're training is measured by its ability to express it in the conditions we need to use it. So that's the most important part. Always remember that. If any listen to a strength coach, they tell you that, run a fucking mile, because that is what preparation is about. So when you are thinking about, well, how do I create repeatability of my most effective things? Number one, you've just got to be able to recover. So just having a very, very good engine. Now that engine, and remember, you don't have to accumulate a ton of volume to develop an engine. You'll get a benefit of aerobic capacity by training 4 times a week, just by doing any training, whether it's gym training or whatever, because it's, go lift weights for an hour. Your heart rate's going to do all right there. You're going to be hitting the certain thresholds. And then it's low and slow, just building that engine very slowly. The challenge that we face all the time is try to replicate the intensities of competition in practice. Competition is competition, practice is practice. You prepare to compete, practice is preparation. So when we understand that as a principle, you're either going to be able to endure speed or power, or have endurance. So it's two very, very different things.
True. Yeah.
So we use it from a sprinting example. For someone to hold a velocity for a flying 30 and that not dip, that is the ability to endure speed. Especially for a team sport athlete. Imagine a team sport athlete being able to hold 10 meters per second for 30 meters. Like, they're fine. Like, they don't need to do anything ever again. So within fighting, it's the ability to endure high velocity movement. And however that is constructed in your practice, and it's the ability to produce that in absence of metabolic waste. So if you do a workout like that, where it's literally, we're just going to do punching speed and punching power for today, you shouldn't feel gas coming out of that. You will feel like a dribbling idiot the following day because you've taxed your nervous system in that way. You'll get sweaty. You will get sweaty, obviously, you're going to train, but it's the ratios. It's going to be fast and rest to maintain speed. So that's when we don't want to get too much. We're not cross pollinating our conditioning. One of the things I found over here is that it's amateur boxing, so they just do everything off 9 minutes, 2 on, 1 off, times 9, and that's it.
Yeah.
I did one session. What did I do? Did about 8. No, it was an hour, and the clock, everything was 2 on, 1 off for an hour. And I nearly threw up a few times, but that was the whole thing. And they're expecting you to be strong, explosive, power. I was tired. Yeah. I was just tired by the end of it. And the same with rugby, team sport. You don't need to prepare to which the extremities of where the competition is going to take you to. Your training will allow you to survive it. And that's the endurance side of it. Does my heart rate drop quick enough? Can I recover in between from training session to training session in my preps? And can I maintain a high output? And those are the fundamental questions that we would look at from a conditioning scenario. Because I'm sure you've got fighters that are like absolute cram workhorses versus fighters who are very not that way.
Yep.
What do you think?
Sports. Yeah. Nah. As you mentioned, like some good examples, like Khabib in the UFC would be like that workhorse, and you'd have maybe someone like Edson Barboza who would be that fast twitch, absolute beast there. But I had a question earlier. I want to try phrase it so it kind of fits into the conversation here to finish off. But he's basically asking around specificity for, say, sprint intervals. So we've had guys like Dr. John Barbrain and Josh on the podcast. They talked a lot about sprint intervals with bikes and heavy bags. And he's asking basically, would you recommend heavy bag sprints for power plus speed development that transfers directly? So basically doing heavy bag, like you mentioned, maybe like 6 to 10 second intervals with full rest to develop power and speed. I think you just answered that. But the second follow-up question to that was, are these ideally paired with gym work that focuses on neural adaptations like plyos and Olympic lifts, or hypertrophy like stronger, bigger, relevant muscles, essentially within the session? So I guess if you're going to do some kind of power-based conditioning on the same day as you go to the gym, is there a preferred day that you would do those on?
Yeah, it's really, that's a good question, because that's how we structuring our training. And the biggest mistake that people will make, coaches and athletes alike, is that they believe everything has to happen in 7 days.
We talked about this with Vern Gambetta about 50 episodes ago. We talked about the death of the 7-day microcycle.
Yeah, it's mad, because it's only it's the way that our brains work, because it's what we've been conditioned to. And
but it's hard. It's so hard to try play. If you think 10 days, you're just like, how? Like, I don't know if it's possible.
Yeah, and so the way that I it's like 10 days. That's Monday to Wednesday.
Yeah, you're like, no, this can't work.
Wednesday is my rest day. No, it's not. So when we're developing our training cycles, I think one, for those, I don't know if you've ever had him on, but Joel Jameson's 8-week Ultimate MMA conditioning book is so good. I've read Science of Running and stuff like that.
Yep. Yeah, that's good
for
too.
energy system focused stuff. But for someone like me, that book's great. It's all in tables and it tells you exactly what to do. So then go and apply it. So if we think about, first and foremost, from this condensed period of time that we're looking at of our preparation cycle, what overall goal do we want from the training? I think that is the number one mistake a lot of people make. They don't clearly define what they want out of a training block. The people who define it the best, bodybuilders.
Yep.
They know exactly what they want out of that next week, 6 weeks. Am I putting a centimeter on here? Am I putting 2 inches on here?
Yep. They are specialization for 6 weeks or something. Yep.
Exactly. They are strategic because they're animals. It's not my jam, but I respect it. Arnie's the GOAT, right? So I do respect it. And the ability to clearly define, right, if I'm going to prep for a fight, my first 10 workouts, okay, in theory, need to take me 40 days. Okay, I've got 40 days to hit 10 workouts. And within those 10 workouts, I want to try and achieve this, this, and this. These are my 3 main objectives. And when I'm classifying training, and if I'm doing double days, if you're doing a double day, all right, if you're doing gymming in the morning and then fight work at night, you will be in a general preparation block, because the accumulative effect of that training will result to increased work capacity, because you're just doing lots of training. You're not going to peak out of doing double days. You can't. The body can't. I don't care who you are. You have to take a lot of drugs.
You've got the special needle, yeah.
Yeah, you take fucking. There's some good drugs out there, but I don't advise taking them. I think the irony with performance enhancing drugs is that they work, so they work. You can't argue with them if they work, but it's my tongue-in-cheek humor. But so when you're structuring that type of training, you could, if you wanted to you could hit 3 workouts in 48 hours, because you could do AM, PM following day. If you do that, if you hit that trifecta, so you do power in the morning, you do your fight work in the night, and the following day you could do some hypertrophy. then you must recover, because that battery bank needs to charge. And here's a really good test. If you're a fighter and you're listening to this and you're tired and you go to the gym and you can't lift the weights that you're used to lift, is that because you got weaker, or is it because you're tired? It's the easy litmus test, and you are never going to adapt from being tired. The higher quality motor potentials and those higher training abilities, you never adapt when you're tired. That's why sometimes I'm 36. I'll go to the gym. I'll start warming up. I'll go, fuck this, I'm out. I'll go in the sauna instead. Because what's the point? I'm not going to do that today. And so when we're clearly I'm very aware, I pass all around the place when I talk. So to clearly define from our current training cycle that we're going into, what is the goal of that? What is the and then the training density, volume, and intensity must replicate that. And the consequence of the preceding cycle of training will be only as effective as the one prior to it. If you have a shit first block, you are fucked in the second block of training. So you need to make sure that you understand the metrics that you're chasing. And a general first block of training will probably look something like increase in compound strength of 2 movements, increase of explosive strength in 1 movement, maintaining body weight whilst increasing workouts, and resting heart rate. That would be it. If you come out of that block and your resting heart rate is all over the place, you're just fucked. You're just fucked. Yeah, you're just in the ringer, Yeah. And also the thing. Think of some of the other things. I know we're running over time, but think of some of the other things that are going to be representation of readiness for your athletes. Like if you're a guy, are you waking up with a hard on or not? If you're not, you're tired, because it's the biggest central nervous system indicator of freshness for a gentleman. I think we can all agree. We all knew what it was like when it was 16. We're fresh and good to go. But it's a. I always say that to coaches and to athletes. For them, it really jars your thought process around how fatigued we are. And then, but what about are you carrying tension in your body? The only way you could understand that is, do you do yoga? Do you train? We talked about training the reflexive responsive movement. Are we training the parasympathetic nervous system? We have to. We can't yin without yang. So you have to think about the other things. Are you going? Are you just angry? Are you irritable? Are you know what I mean? There's going to be so many other indicators that aren't anything to do with training, but they're to do with you. And they're really important to understand as well. So I hope that helped. I wanted to try and give another sort of context to that, because people at the end of the day as well.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And no, this was an insightful chat, Sam. I thoroughly enjoyed this, and I hope the listeners as well got some of their questions answered too. This will go up in a couple of weeks. But where can people find and follow you and keep up with what you're doing?
Sam Portland, anywhere you consume your media. Sam Portland. Yeah, I learned that the hard way. The first time it was like, right, my Twitter's this, my this is that, and I was like, no, Sam Portland. Just look for me, and I'll be there. But yeah, I love that. I didn't know there was going to be people live. That's sick.
Yeah, man.
That's so good.
Man. Every now and then, people jump in and ask questions. So it's awesome having you guys here that listening, because it helps bring questions and helps direct the conversation towards what you guys need as well. So for anyone listening to the podcast recording, make sure jump on the Sweet Science of Fighting YouTube channel, because I scheduled the lives ahead of time, so they're all there. But I appreciate you coming on, Sam, and we'll stay in touch.
Yeah, thanks, man. Great to reconnect with you. What you're doing is awesome. Awesome.
I
So
appreciate
good.
it.
Cheers, mate.